What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down in the Boston studio here in DraftKings. And that makes her the only one of us not in my apartment right now here on GoJo and Golic. My dad's out here getting ready to be on the call for Westwood One for Monday Night Football, Chargers and Cowboys that we'll get to in a little bit. But that means he's sleeping in my apartment and doing the show from my small nook over here.
Sleeping in your bed.
Yes, Jesse, he was nice enough because I've been here before and he made me sleep on the couch. I don't know if he felt bad from that experience or not, but he did give me the bed, which was very nice. But it has been a while since I stayed in a single guy's apartment. As I addressed yesterday afternoon, I said, hey, what do you have for the morning? You know, I like to, eat a little bit, have some coffee. And he said, well, I got a Keurig over there. I think I got some coffee.
I have a what?
A Keurig?
A Keurig?
Keurig, whatever. Keurig.
You use one every morning at your house. You have a Keurig.
Doesn't mean I have to know what it's called.
The coffee maker.
A Keurig?
A Keurig.
Well, I know who's not going to sponsor our show soon.
All right. He has a coffee maker here that I can make coffee. And I looked in his pantry, Jesse, and it's basically almonds.
Oh, and beef jerky.
I could have, yeah. That's what he said to me. I said, what do you got going on in the morning? I said, do you have any breakfast type things? He has, I have almonds and beef jerky.
Because
beef jerky, yes,
GoJo's
breakfast of champions.
An intermittent faster. He's not a breakfast guy.
Yeah.
But he has a guest coming in. I mean, if you have a guest coming in, do you maybe think about that person at all?
It's football season. I think about the air in front of my face. I was just on the road in Seattle last week. I'm moving around all the time. There's a lot going on here. I can't be planning for 4 or 5 days out. Right. And also, you're not a baby. Like, if you want something, you asked for something yesterday, and we remedied that. I took you to the little shop down the street. We were able to get you snackos. I took you to different restaurants around here. I DoorDashed you food yesterday.
You did.
I have provided for you here, and yet that doesn't appear to be good enough because you want to make this a single thing. Really, this is the first time you've had to live or spend a night without my mom providing for you in God knows how long.
I mean, I thought you're 34 years old that you would have the house a little more prepared for your father to stop by instead of you're kind of doing it on the fly. And I like I get you were in Seattle. All right. Hell of a game you had.
It's an incredible game. It's an incredible game.
What did you say after that? Then I'm doing other stuff. I mean, what other stuff you doing? What else you got going on?
Listen, man, I got stuff to prepare for that game. I got stuff to prepare for this show every day. I got to come out here and shoulder this 60-year-old load.
And watched football. That was our preparation.
Yeah, and I couldn't leave to go get stuff yesterday during that in good conscience. I learned by watching you years of my childhood where my dad would look at my mom who needed him to do any number of things during the course of a Sunday and then would say, sorry, I've got to watch this for work. That's what I had to do. I got Sunday football I got to watch for work. I got Monday football I got to watch for work. I got Thursday football I got to watch for work. I can't possibly be moved.
We will bring your mother on this show. I do laundry at times. I shop.
At times.
I go get food.
At times.
At times. I said at times. I didn't say all the time. I know how to do it. So I'm not left completely stranded when your mother is away. I can prepare the house and get it ready, especially if there are guests coming in. Yeah. Find out their likes and their dislikes. Have some.
You're not doing a survey on the way in and getting this. Don't see the lies have really started. Now,
I will say, I think that our generation does not have the hosting gene that was sort of ingrained into our parents, perhaps by their parents, which is like a very 50s housewife vibe of like, I have a water by your bed and I have your, food preference in the pantry and I'm gonna, serve you every meal, whatever. We don't, my parents come to my house and my mom's like, what's going on here?
What do you got?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's just something that our generation is missing.
Isn't it something you could change?
Well, I live in a 900 square foot apartment that is right next to the ocean. My gift is that we walk outside. The whole point is we're not going to spend a lot of time in here. That's my entire MO with this place here. We're going to get out. We're going to see things. We're going to feel the ocean air, all these things that are going to revitalize you, rejuvenate you ahead of this matchup here.
Listen, that is a wonderful aspect of this. But also, Jesse, we went out to dinner last night. I'm a guest in his city, in his house. We went to dinner. Guess who had the shortest arms in the world when the bill came?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're rich.
Yeah.
I forgot my wallet. But you can't even use that excuse.
You're rich.
Because you're not hurting, my friend.
Yeah, well, I understand that. Big bank take little bank, though. I mean, the minute that changes, that's the minute I'll start reaching for the wallet a little faster.
It is amazing. After dinner, of which I paid for, we went to the little shop to get these, little breakfast bars. And of course, he bought that.
Yeah.
I paid the big bill. He paid the $4 bill.
I give and I give. I pay.
Yeah.
I pay that place all the time. You're visiting. It's time to help stimulate the local economy. All right. Speaking of stimulating the economy,
I'm try and make it through the show, Jesse. I'm hungry.
He could lose consciousness. We'll keep an eye on you.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Understand, I'm playing hurt today because of
God. I didn't realize we were going to have this much whining on here. I thought I was inviting a 60-year-old man here, not my nephew Jackson. This is a very interesting turn of events. We, speaking of finances, are brought to you by Wrangler. Made for the ride of life. Save 15% in your Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. We do have a great show for you today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out on DraftKings YouTube channel, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. David Helman from Fox Sports covered the Cowboys. Does a great job over there with their NFL podcasting as well. Going to join us in a little bit to get ready for the Sunday night football or the Monday night football game that you are going to be on with Kevin Harlan on Westwood One coming up. And Dad, if it's anything like the rest of the weekend, we should prepare for the strangest result humanly possible with the least amount of offense humanly possible. You had to be just, absolutely
loving it.
Thriving, watching defensive football win the day over the weekend. Some of the wonkiest results known to man. Sunday night football, perfectly emblematic of what we dealt with, except for the fact that the Bills were able to survive. If the weekend pattern had held, one of the best teams in football would have lost to a team not playing with their starting quarterback that somehow managed to defense them to death.
So I think what we saw, Sunday, all day Sunday and then Sunday night was great defense. And I still want to find out where I can grab it. The amount of penalties, it felt to me like it was an inordinate amount of penalties.
A lot of yellow out there.
A lot of flags, slowing down games. And I believe at last count, including last night, there were 6 backup quarterbacks used this week. So there were a lot, and including some like a Zach Wilson, who wasn't a starter. He is the backup, even though he's starting for the season now. He's been a starter before. But other true backups that had to come into the game or start the game like last night because Daniel Jones was off for the Giants. So Tyrod Taylor was in. I think he's on a 6th team.
Revenge game. One of the many revenge games for Tyrod Taylor.
As you said, his only revenge game should be the Chargers because that's.
It should be him versus the Chargers. Team doctor.
Team doctor and messed that one up. But so we had backup quarterbacks, a lot of flags, but we had awesome defense. And I know there are those out there that if it's not 35-30, it wasn't a good game. And that's so untrue. And when you have a great defensive battle, when you have great matchups that you're watching on the line. You saw defenses getting after it incredibly well, like the Cleveland Browns against San Francisco, like the Jets against the Philadelphia Eagles, which we'll get to. And last night the same way. But boy, last night, I mean, the Giants kind of put themselves on a bad. They were up 6-0 at halftime, and it should have been 9-0 at least or more, the way they screwed that one up. And those 3 points proved to be pretty important come the end of the game and what the Giants needed to do, getting a touchdown instead of just needing a field goal.
Yeah, the end of the half is going to be the subject of a lot of scrutiny for the New York Giants coming off today, because you're right, their defense surprisingly gave them a chance over the course of the night, where Josh Allen and that Buffalo Bills offense really had a hard time getting on track. Both teams ended up rushing the ball pretty well. The Giants, not surprising, Saquon Barkley back in the lineup there and looked incredibly important in a backfield where you weren't going to have Daniel Jones as that run threat the way that you normally do. But we get to the end of the first half, and as you said, they've got a chance to add points at the end of the first half. They are down inside the 5-yard line, really on the goal line. They're about the 1 or 2 yard line at the end of the half. And on the final play, there's about 6 seconds left on the clock. Tyrod Taylor lines up under center. You see him tap his helmet there. It appears to be a check play. They run the football. No timeouts left. Try and get up to the line. The Bills are rightly laying all over them, trying to slow that process up. And they end up not being able to get a playoff before the end of the half. No points, no crack at the end zone, no chance to get the field goal team out there, nothing. And you see
horribly done.
Brian Daboll, their head coach, absolutely beside himself. He's browbeating Tyrod Taylor up and down the sideline. This was Brian Daboll talking after the game about that play to end the half.
Had a play called. It was a run action pass play, and ended up alerting it to a run. Didn't get it off.
So Brian Daboll there talks about it was an alerted play.
Right.
It was something that Tyrod Taylor checked to. And boy, oh boy, I had a lot of y'all that apparently had long, illustrious NFL careers in my mentions explaining to me that, oh no, every play pretty much has a run or pass option checked on it. First off, no. And not only, listen, I understand my NFL experience was brief, but a whisper in the evening there through training camps. So I double checked with multiple guys that had long NFL careers. Hey, just so I'm not crazy and I'm remembering this right, not every play has got a kill tag on it that can get you to another play, run to run, pass to pass, run to pass, whatever it is. And no, of course, the answer was no there.
Right.
And so my question in this situation and my assertion in this situation is yes, while Tyrod Taylor is a veteran in this league and a guy who should absolutely know better in that situation than to check to the run play there unless it's communicated to everybody. Because you saw, Dad, there was no real sense of urgency after that run of everyone to understand, hey, we got to get back up to the line. We got to spike the football. We got to have the NASCAR field goal team ready. Whatever the plan would have been, that would have indicated everyone was ready on that. But also, if you're the offensive coordinator, if you're Mike Kafka and company, if you don't want a run checked, an easy way to assure that happens is to make sure you don't call a play with a run check on it, of which there are plenty in there. I'm sure as the Giants were driving at the end of the game, a lot of those 2-minute drill hurry-up plays did not have run kills on them during that time because you've got plenty on the call sheet. My only point is it's not just coaching. It's not just the player. Everyone situationally has to wear that in that spot if that's truly an outcome you didn't want.
Yeah, there's plans of coaching, playing, play calling, and time of clock. There were actually 14 seconds left before that play. 14 seconds when they started that play. And they check to the run. Barkley gets tackled, and the defense is absolutely doing the right thing of laying on the players and not letting them get up to get a kill off there. So, yeah, you depends on where you want to assign blame, and it's more than one person. I agree with you. Don't call a play with a check. Tyrod Taylor's been around long enough to go, wait a minute. I can't check to a run here. We don't have enough time, to run the field goal team on.
Or if we've got 14 seconds, then everybody needs to know going in, hey, if we do this, we got to get up to the line now.
And in all honesty, I would never have done it because you have another side of the ball where 11 guys know the situation as well, and they're going to lay on you. They are not going to let you up. They're going to cost you some time. A running play where there's no shot a running play was going to happen unless you knew we're either going to run and get the ball in or we're going to have time without any points, which would be the worst way to think about it because you were right there to get some points. So Where do you want to lay blame? Coaching, player that should know not to check to the run. But to your point, everybody needs to be on the same page at that point of what we need to do. They work on this all week. I mean, you work on time situations all week, and over the years of playing, you understand timing situations. They blew this thing so bad that, again, what it cost them. Now, if you, it's easy to say if you had those points what it would have been, but
Sure.
But the bottom line is, coming into the end, it was 14-9, and they had the ball with over a minute to go, but needed a touchdown. Throw in those 3 points at the end of the half, it could have been 14-12, and all they needed was field goal position, of which they were in. I mean, they were close to the end zone to score. They had the ball on the 1 yard line at the end of the game because of an interference call in the end zone on what would have been the last play of the game. So they were easily in position to win by a field goal, wouldn't even need to go that far. So, yeah, and again, you just can't put that situation at the end and say that's what it would have been, but they would have had 3 more points. That was so horribly. We've talked about college situations where they've done bad timing, and we've seen it in the NFL, obviously, but that was really, really bad last night. And Dayball, I thought he was going to explode on the sideline. He was doing Melissa Stark was talking to him. This was off camera about it.
This is crazy.
And he was just like, Melissa, I can't even think straight right now. I can't even give you an answer on this. I'm so frustrated at what happened. I'm sorry. I can't answer that question.
That's a real, he just like me for real moment where we've all been that level of frustrated. And it's a good reminder that it is insane that these coaches and players are able to compose themselves enough to give answers in most of these situations when they're out here playing violent 4D Wizards chest on every given down and distance.
Listen, that's why we love NASCAR. Dude gets, wrecked against the wall on someone. A minute later, you got a microphone in front of his face, and he wants to beat the hell out of the guy that just put him in the wall. And you're like, yeah, give us this.
Yeah, it was damn impressive there. So, Dad, we've got that on one side with the Giants, where you've got a very frustrated Brian Daboll, who understandably, Daniel Jones missing this game with the neck injury. They're hopeful to have him back next weekend by the time they play the Washington Commanders. But obviously a neck, not something you want to play with, certainly with your star quarterback, who is also an involved part of your run game. That's going to make it extremely difficult for the New York Giants going forward. The Bills survived this by the skin of their teeth. Josh Allen and company make just enough plays down at the end. There was all this conversation about Josh Allen and how he wasn't going to make any more of these crazy throws. And instead, on the touchdown that ultimately ends up winning them the game, he ends up targeting a tight end who had not even been targeted once this season. Dalton Kincaid, their rookie first-round pick, was out for this game. And so he ends up targeting a tight end that hasn't been targeted this season on a throw where he was rolling out, going back across his body, and fitted in between 2 defenders in a way that would be crazy by most people. Seth Walder over at ESPN, they post the NFL Next Gen Stats dots, where they show the way the dots moved around in a given play. Even the dots looked insane and inadvisable, but that's the kind of stuff that you sign up for when Josh Allen is your quarterback, and more often than not, you count on it winning you games like this.
His name is Quentin Morris.
Thank you for finding that, because I couldn't remember it, and that's why I was stalling.
A second-year player who talk about knowing your job, of doing the job he was supposed to, the route he ran, and then when he saw his quarterback rolling right, breaking the pocket, how he turned it into, I turn, go to the end zone, look, and they were on the same page for a guy that's rarely used in Morris at tight end. So that was pretty impressive. Also, by the way, and
oh boy,
why again they turn down, they review everything. So why you can't review a roughing the passer in today's game was one of the worst last night. They got called on the Giants hitting, and I think the ref was behind and saw the defender's arm go up and thought it hit Josh Allen in the head. But it caught Josh Allen in the hand. He went for the throwing hand, hit him in the hand, bumped into him. Allen went down. They called roughing the passer. It was, and there have been horrible ones, one of the worst calls I have ever seen. And if you go to replay, I really think, Mike, if you use replay, you could find out really quickly if it was roughing the passer.
Doing like the expedited replay. Because in general, I've been out on the idea of reviewing things like roughing the passer because the games are already long enough. There's been proof of concept, both college and pro, that you can expedite some of these replays. But I also think that's one that, because of the proclivity of throwing flags on that, refs are so overcautious on that, where in real time, that feels like something, given some of the other stuff these guys see, you'd be able to pull off.
I agree, because there was also a hit downfield by a DB that did a great job of laying a shoulder into the chest.
Yeah.
and got called. That's the other thing that I can't stand. If it's a hard hit downfield, they throw the flag. 80% of the time they're throwing the flag because it's a hard hit, and they don't want to be the guy that doesn't throw a flag if it's a hard hit and someone gets hurt. But it was a hard, clean hit. And again, it cost a defense 15 yards. And in the case of the rough on the passer, the Giants would have been off the field. But it gives Buffalo a first down to keep the drive going. It's just screwing the defense.
Well, you want to talk about the penalty that's going to be stuck in everyone's craw at the end of the game last night. Where you've got the Giants knocking on the doorstep.
Play before.
And the game goes for untimed down because the pass interference had been called on the Bills defense. And then the very last play, it was a good call. It was pass interference, but it was also defensive holding on the very last play when Darren Waller was the lone route in the end zone, which I disagree in the play call of having one option on the final play, but they toss the ball up to Darren Waller where you saw him getting held the majority of the time. I don't know what Terry McAulay was talking about after that game. The replay showed clear holding and yet wasn't called in that spot a moment after you called the penalty on the last play. Maddening stuff to end Sunday Night Football. And oh, by the way, we're just getting started. The two undefeateds, no more, to backup quarterbacks. Next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. And Dad, we had so much belly aching to do about how that Bills and Giants game went down last night, which would have been a disturbing trend of Josh Allen against Meadowland or MetLife Stadium tenants on backup quarterbacks after the loss at the beginning of the season to the New York Jets. But they hold on, Dad. The same could not be said for the remaining two unbeatens in the NFL yesterday. We walked into a weekend. We had talked about on the show a bunch of the prop bets around when the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers might lose, who would be the last team remaining. I don't know how many prop bets or bingo cards had them both going down on the same weekend to the two teams that they ended up losing to. Yet here we are. The San Francisco 49ers get dropped by a Deshaun Watson-less Cleveland Browns team who was coming off a bye and still did not have their starting quarterback dealing with a rotator cuff injury. Is he still? And then the Philadelphia Eagles losing to Zach Wilson's New York Jets. I saw Chris Jones from the Kansas City Chiefs taking great pleasure in that, who defended Zach Wilson to Rodney Harrison on Football Night in America. Dad, which of these outcomes surprised you a little bit more here? The Jets win 2014 against the Eagles. The Browns win 1917. So both closely contested defensive-led games, but both also now no longer with that 0 in the L column.
I would say because while they're the 2 undefeated teams, we felt San Francisco was playing the best ball.
Sure. Right,
on both sides of the ball. The offense they had, their defense was number 1 in the league. And P.J. Walker, nothing against P.J. Walker, but it's not Deshaun Watson. DTR got to play when Watson got hurt before, but he didn't play in this. It was P.J. Walker who got brought up from the practice squad to be the quarterback. And listen, his stats weren't great. He was, 18 of 34 for a $192, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So, his part of it wasn't fantastic by any stretch. We're going to talk about this and the Eagles. This was the defense of the Browns and the defense of the Jets. The defenses were absolutely fantastic in this game. I will say this. This was Brock Purdy's first regular season loss.
Yep.
And dare I say he looked pretty human when he didn't have some of his weapons. So in this one, you had Christian McCaffrey got hurt. And when he went out, he tried to come back in, then went out for good.
An oblique injury that also got a rib designation after the game from Kyle Shanahan. Tried to come back in for one play and then didn't re-enter in the fourth.
And as I said, that's his problem because he has obliques. Don't have obliques.
That is true.
An oblique problem.
You just got jelly rolls. None of that happens.
I used to say when I didn't cramp up, I said fat doesn't cramp. So you know what? I was able to be on the field. And then Deebo Samuel was out. When he was out, he was done. He
shoulder injury.
Shoulder injury got carted to the locker room for a while. Trent Williams was out. Not long. He didn't
not long. He had an ankle. They went on the sideline and taped that up. And then because he's not made of the same material the rest of us are, he's back out there.
He's frightening. We can talk about the
pregame fight. This game was chippy at the jump, and you saw all the DBs and wideouts fighting on the field.
This was one of the coolest things. If you haven't seen it, it's all over Twitter. Before the game, Deebo Samuel and another one of the receivers for San Francisco are fighting with the DBs before the game. Deebo Samuel headbutted one of them, and all the DBs are around. And then, like a blur, in comes 71, Trent Williams, and knocks one of the DBs out of the way and stands there. And just imagine the light going on in your kitchen and cockroaches scattering. There was not one DB or Browns player that wanted to trifle with that young man.
No.
It was, now again, these were all DBs and they were clearly outmatched. But still, you bow up, man. When you got a football player, you got uniform on.
Usually it's not like in most of those situations, it's not going to escalate to a real fight.
He's not gonna swing and knock you out.
But you saw in that moment, because there's certain guys. I always said in football, you got to know the difference between the guys that are really about that life and the guys that are just going to go out there for funsies. And Trent Williams seems to be one of those guys that's actually about that life enough where the reputation precedes him. And everyone looked and they made the value prop in their head and said, that ain't worth it. That ain't worth it.
You got to watch that. Just that 5-second clip was absolutely hilarious. But so you had McCaffrey out, you had Deebo out, and Brock Purdy did not play his best game by any stretch of the imagination. Now, give a lot of credit to the Browns defense, but you were usually able to see San Francisco overcome an awful lot because they have all that talent on the field, but they weren't able to. And Brock's day was not very good. It wasn't the greatest weather in the world, but that's certainly not the excuse. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And going forward, we'll see. Now, I don't know yet at this point how damning those injuries were, if those guys are going to miss time. But we know they're a well-stocked offense when all those guys are healthy. And missing a couple, it seemed to bring Brock Purdy down to earth a little bit.
So I'll say this, and I didn't anticipate being this guy, but you looked at it, and you're right, Brock Purdy, once all that happened, and I saw the internet taking him to task, all the memes there, the script wrote itself, 12 of 27. It was career lows in passing yards with 125, completion percentage at 44%, and yards per attempt at 4.6. That being said, this was in some ways the more understanding result to me, because Dad, as we know, losing guys in game like that, in mass, when you've already got the game plan set, much harder to recover from than losing guys during the week where all of a sudden you've got time to adjust, you can change things around here. And so I look at that and go, well, yeah, obviously a lot of quarterbacks we've seen struggle. Even guys that are more talented than Brock Purdy, who have been around for longer than Brock Purdy, struggle on that spot. So that's not as surprising. The Jim Schwartz factor in all this against Kyle Shanahan.
Incredible.
Jim Schwartz now 8-1 in his last 9 meetings against Kyle Shanahan's offense when they have been the primary play callers. They had a 10th meeting at some point where Kyle Shanahan was a senior where Jim Schwartz was a senior defensive analyst. But Shanahan's teams have now lost 9 consecutive matchups against Schwartz, and Schwartz's defense have held Shanahan's offense to 20 points or fewer every time, to an average of 14.8 points in the last 10 meetings, according to Marcus Thompson from The Athletic. So that's also a factor in all this, versus an Eagles team in the other game that we looked at and said had kind of felt off this entire time. That we looked at and said, well, they hadn't been playing their best ball. They had said they hadn't been playing their best ball, especially on offense. We had seen a frustrated Jason Kelce a week ago about the red zone offense and that situation. And so I look at the 49ers and I go, well, I can excuse that away a little bit easier because of that cocktail of events. And if you want to use it to slight Brock Purdy, then so be it. I think it's a reminder. Listen, he's a great quarterback in their context, but he's still a young player. He still hasn't played 17 games, a full game, season's worth of games in his career yet, in adverse weather and that kind of matchup, versus an Eagles team on the other side that, listen, you lost Lane Johnson early in that game, which we cannot overstate is a huge blow at right tackle, one of the best in the league. But I looked at that Eagles loss and I said, okay, this is a little more worrisome because it felt like we had been waiting for this to happen for them, versus a 49ers team that, listen, as long as those guys aren't out for a long period of time, I still feel confident in them coming back and being exactly who they've been.
So we said one of the best matchups of the weekend was going to be the Eagles O-line against the Jets D-line.
Yeah.
And the Jets D-line won this because, remember in this one, the Jets secondary lost 3 players. They were without 3 players in the secondary, yet what happened? The Eagles were held scoreless on their final 7 drives. Hurts was pressured on a season-high 40% of his dropbacks, despite only a handful of blitzes. So the Jets didn't have to blitz. They had their front 4 rushing and getting pressure. And when you can do that, man, that's helping and protecting your secondary, which is now, having a few less guys in it. So that was a great complementary football of one side helping the other. So both defenses here, I credit that defense really quick with the Browns defense. 5 games, the Browns have given up a tick over 1,000 yards. That's 200 yards a game they're giving up right now. It's the fewest yards allowed through 5 games by any team since the Colts in 1971.
Yeah.
That's how good this Browns defense is playing, and that's how good they're going to have to continue to play, depending on Deshaun Watson coming back and what's happening with the offense.
And I think that's been part of the frustration with the failed Deshaun Watson experiment so far is, hey, you looked around at the rest of this roster, and clearly that defense is ready to party. Looks like the best in the league at this point. And yet here we are with the struggles that are going to persist on that side of the ball. The Jalen Hurts interception at the end of the game, I think, might be the play between these two quarterbacks that's going to stick in most people's craw. Just a bad ball into double coverage that sets them up ultimately to lose this game in a spot where he should have won, as the guy who's more tenured, as the guy who got the second contract already. Again, for Brock Purdy, I don't want to say I've turned fully into Brock Purdy defender, but I look at yesterday and I go, given the confluence of circumstances, I can understand that a lot more than I can understand what happened in Philadelphia in this game this weekend. But with that being said, we got both unbeatens now down. We'll have a conversation in a little bit about the 5-1 team we trust the most. But coming up next, it's time to strike up the band, baby.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, USC fell to Notre Dame over the weekend, and it was ugly for Caleb Williams. All right, he threw for 199 yards, touchdown, and 3 interceptions in that 48-20 loss. And his Heisman odds saw some serious movement. So before the game, he's plus 250. First quarter, oh no, we've moved to plus 400. Halftime, take a big ol' leap to plus 1,500. And currently, as it stands, Caleb Williams' Heisman odds are sitting at plus 2,000. Fellas, quite a win for Notre Dame, but kind of bittersweet. Are you really just harping on that Louisville loss here now? You're like, come on, we lose to Louisville, then we come out and this happens.
Yeah, listen. Now there's plenty of season to go. They still have Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, Stanford to go. All winnable games, but you never know. We just saw Pitt take care of Louisville.
Yeah, what the hell?
I mean, seriously. Though Louisville doesn't have a great record.
Yeah, I heard this stat yesterday. Shout out to Roddy Jones over at the ACC Network. Jeff Brom now 0-4 the week after beating an AP top 10 team. Yeah. So stunned by that. But I understand people are going to harp on that, Dad. The fact that Notre Dame's season now no longer has college football playoff hopes the way it could have here had they taken care of business in that way. I still look at this. Notre Dame versus USC is singular. That's a rivalry game that you go to that school to be a part of and win. You saw the graphics before the game, the history of these two schools, what they mean to college football individually, and to be able to do that, to thoroughly embarrass your rival at home in a moment like that was do or die. We said this is as must win for Notre Dame as any game we can remember. A potential 3-game slide, 2 of those to ranked opponents, 2 of them at home, all of it before a bye week where you'd have some real existential dread keep in. And instead, they pick off the reigning Heisman Trophy winner 3 times and a half and absolutely defensively mud stomp their way into a win like this at home, a resounding win that now gives Marcus Freeman in his first 2 seasons 2 wins against top 10 opponents here. According to Tim Beret, the former great SID over at Clemson, in a year and a half now, Marcus Freeman has as many top 10 wins at Notre Dame Stadium as Brian Kelly had in 12 years. Some of that's schedule, some of that's otherwise, but it also shows you, hey, listen, the consistency, we're waiting there. But Marcus Freeman, in terms of the performance in big-time games like this, has given Notre Dame a couple of bangers in the first couple seasons.
So, as we had talked about, Notre Dame, independent, 4 teams in the college playoffs, 2 losses, and you're done. So
sure,
that's the goal every year at Notre Dame for a lot of teams. But for a lot of teams, it's win your conference, get to the playoffs, win a national championship. Notre Dame doesn't have that ability to win a conference, and I'm fine with that. So we know it was done when they lost to Louisville. But you had USC coming up. And to me, I know for you it was Michigan. Michigan is your kind of biggest rival.
As a player, I hated them the most, but I understood what the USC rivalry meant the most. I was told the story. We had to beat them to go 12-0 to go to the national title in 2012. And I sat with you in the hotel the night before and said none of that really seemed to matter in that moment because you come here to beat USC. Right. And to get to do it in the Coliseum was awesome, but to get to do it at home the way Notre Dame did there, I agree with you because that was the biggest rival for you, right?
Without question. Without question, to me, it's the biggest rivalry when I was there. Certainly when my brother Bob was there, was Notre Dame USC. And it's a lot of guys that got recruited by the same teams, guys that you get to know each other. And if you're a Notre Dame guy from California, you probably played with a lot of the guys that ended up going to USC. So I think Benjamin Morrison and Jerry Rice's son, who is a wide receiver for USC, played against each other or with each other in Little League football.
Yeah, BMO said he was going down the street to the guy's house to play when they were kids. He knew a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I can't stand USC. To me, that's the rivalry. So since Notre Dame's national championship hopes and playoff hopes were over, my thought is spoil USC. They're undefeated. They're a top 10 team. And spoil Caleb Williams' shot at back-to-back Heisman. That was my only thought. And that's exactly what happened. Notre Dame defense, we talked about the defense in the NFL over the weekend. The Notre Dame defense, this may have been one of Al Golden's crowning moments as a defensive coach. Now, he's been a head coach as well, but normally as a defensive coordinator, what he was doing and how the players were, the practical application on the field was absolutely incredible. Pressuring Caleb Williams, because last year against Notre Dame, Caleb Williams was getting free on scrambles and making big plays down the field. This time they contained him a little more. Caleb still made some plays because he's that good, but he really got muted a lot by this defense. the Notre Dame offense really hasn't gotten into gear the way I would have hoped in the last few games. And hopefully they can in the
They didn't really have to in this game. The Irish had one drive longer than 50 yards in this game. They were 3 of 10 on third down, but they scored in all 5 of their red zone possessions, many of which were turnover assisted by a defense that had 5 of them overall.
Exactly right. So their field was shorter because of the turnovers. And let's be honest, USC's defense is not very good. So I expected more of an output from the Notre Dame offense. But obviously you take the win, and it was a destruction. Just what you want to see, certainly if you're a Notre Dame fan, before you go into your bye. Again, their string of 4 in a row, 4 night games, 4 undefeated teams, all ranked. This one being, the 10th ranked USC.
8 straight to start the season before the bye, going all the way back to week 0 that you played in Ireland. It's an unprecedented stretch, and people are going to talk about where they out of gas against Louisville, whatever it was. They now get a chance to collect themselves. Dad, this is as big and timely a win as you could have possibly asked for in Marcus Freeman's young tenure here at Notre Dame. I was never one of the people who started to get up in arms about what the future looked like there when these losses piled up. But for the fan base, for everything else, this win goes a long way in reminding everybody exactly what you brought this man here for and exactly what this program is still capable of. As you see, changes in leadership upcoming. He highlighted in the locker room Jack Swarbrick, the outgoing athletic director, Father John Jenkins, the outgoing university president, who announced his plan to retire this past week. And so all of that, as you've had this changing of the guard around the school, this is a reminder that you still believe you picked the right leader in Marcus Freeman at the helm of this program, because we know getting wins in rivalry games goes a long way in every coach's evaluation process.
Yeah, and you always wonder who's going to step up in the big game. And as we mentioned, this time it was the defense. The defense only had 11 sacks going into this game. They got 6 in this game, 11 tackles for loss, 3 more quarterback hurries as well. They were on fire. They had it going on. As we mentioned, gave the short field to Notre Dame as well. Really, I think frustrated the hell out of Caleb Williams, who was going to be the number 1 pick in this draft. I don't think that's going to have an effect there. Could have an effect on the Heisman. I think Michael Penix Jr. from Washington.
And Michael Penix Jr. was the favorite going into this weekend. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in the all-weekend team with what went on in that Washington-Oregon game. Firmly in the driver's seat now after a massive win for the Huskies.
Monster game that you had to call there, with Oregon getting a 36-33 win there and a missed field goal at the end for Oregon. What a shame for the kicker there. But yeah, my wife and I got to be at that game. We watched that Notre Dame game. It was just glorious to watch. As I said, when it's against USC, man, I can't get enough of that. So it was a great night. As I meant, it's not a great night for the offense, but a great night for the defense, and I'm cool with that. Now a well-deserved bye after 8 games, so they get to kind of catch their breath. And I still think if they win out, if they can do that, I think they'll be in the New Year's Six Bowl at 10-2.
They're going to have a great opportunity because we are really getting into, as we've talked about, the meat of the Pac-12 schedule. The Big Ten teams are going to start playing each other once we get to the month of November. There's some great ACC showdowns. North Carolina putting it on Miami this weekend. Tez Walker, also another guy who's going to be involved in that all-weekend team. Notre Dame scores on offense, defense, and special teams to finish with the most points against an AP top 10 opponent since 54 against 9th-ranked Boston College back in 1992.
And one thing I'll say, and I'm not saying this because it was Notre Dame, I'll say this because I see it in other places that people complain, why you're rushing the field on this win or that win. Who cares? These are college students, man. If you want to rush the field, have a ball. I mean, I've been saying this, like I said, it's not just this game. There are other games where people have questioned why Team X rushed the field when maybe, they should have won that game, or why was it a big enough deal to rush the field? I don't care, man. Rush the field, have a ball.
Yeah, I'd agree. The one thing I don't agree with is I saw one of the kids, there was a picture going around of a kid going up to Caleb Williams on the field and messing with him after the game, Notre Dame fan. That's lame. Leave the players from the opposing team. Right. Quite honestly, that's how you get your ass kicked if you're not careful. You poke the wrong bear down in a high-stakes, high-emotional environment like that, and you take your safety into your own hands.
Don't have a lot for you if that happened to you when you're messing with a player on the field.
No, exactly. But no, congratulations to Notre Dame. I know for a lot of people, they expected the identity to be on offense when you brought Sam Hartman over. But I think for a defensive-minded head coach, you got reminded in this game, Notre Dame's identity right now still on defense, and that can still win you a whole lot of ball games. Coming up next, let's get to the all-weekend team here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. It is time for us to take a look back at the weekend and have the guys give us their all-weekend team. So we're going to have all-weekend honorable mention, all-weekend second team, all-weekend first team. A lot went down, guys. Let's start with honorable mention.
Yeah, let's get it going, Dad. And while we're going to try and resist the homer urge to give every one of these to a Notre Dame player or coach in a game that saved their season against USC, we actually have some other very deserving candidates to get to here on the all-weekend team. Let's start with honorable mention. I want to start off with this. Elsewhere in college football, Tez Walker had a game that reminded you exactly what North Carolina was fighting for to get him back after a lengthy delay over his eligibility with the NCAA and a horrendous, shameful job by that organization in accounting for this young man's situation and future. Tez Walker goes for 6 catches for 132 yards and 3 of Drake May's 4 touchdowns against Miami as they take down the Hurricanes in one of the biggest ACC matchups so far of the year. Dad, the talent was fully on display. So happy for the young man. You saw the emotion when Matt Brown got to tell him last week that he had been reinstated. This was his first start since being reinstated, since he had been running scout team for most of the year, thinking he wasn't going to get to play, and instead goes out here. And after all of that, balls on the biggest stage for them. Kudos to him. Awesome moment for him.
I'm glad he was able to finally show his talents. It was a joke from the NCAA that he wasn't eligible from the beginning of the season. It could have been doing this all year, but what a time to have a big game in a big game like that for North Carolina, who remains undefeated. So congrats to him. I'm with you there. My honorable mention is going to go to Jordan Montgomery, pitcher for Texas. The Rangers, they win last night 2-0 against Houston in game 1 of the ALCS. And Montgomery has been fantastic as of late. Last month he had 2 earned runs over 27 innings the last 4 starts, and he's got a 2 ERA in 3 postseason starts. He outdueled Justin Verlander in this game. He had bases loaded in the 4th and got a strikeout on the 3rd out there to end that one. 6 1/3 scoreless last night. Second scoreless or consecutive scoreless start for him. So big game right out of the gate on the road for Texas, who, by the way, is 6-0 in the postseason.
Yeah.
And taking on the favored Houston Astros in this one. So Jordan Montgomery, nice outing by you.
And just like that, Texas is back.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the all-weekend second team pick here, Dad. I'll go Max Crosby on this one. Congratulations to our good friend Jason Fitz for getting a win. His lifelong diehard Raiders go out and beat the New England Patriots, and Max Crosby was also almost the GOAT on the other side, the bad kind of GOAT, a roughing the passer penalty that had given the Patriots a score on the doorstep earlier in this game before ultimately, as the Patriots are driving and trying to get a win, Max Crosby actually gets the game-sealing half sack in the end zone for this team. Finished tied for the team lead with 7 tackles, 4 solo, half a sack, a pass defense, and that quarterback hit. He's been phenomenal on a Raiders team that had no Jimmy Garoppolo because of a back injury for much of this game. Brian Poyer, another former Patriot in a matchup full of former Patriots out there on the field, gets sacked by Max Crosby, who's been maybe the most consistent bright spot of this team during a season that's been largely forgettable so far.
He's got to go home after every game and say, man, I'd love some help.
Exhausted.
Some kind of help coming on the field for me. We talk about, he's got that huge motor. I think much like Aiden Hutchinson from Detroit has a huge motor, but Aiden has some help on that defense that Max Crosby at this point does not have.
On that play, by the way, he beat the tight end that was supposed to chip help him.
What was the tackle doing?
And then beat the tackle.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
I've never seen 2 guys both get double hand swiped so quickly in such rapid succession and so smooth. Max Crosby's been one of the best pass rushers in the league, but showed up in the biggest moment right there, which is always impressive.
So the second team in mine is going to go to Xavier Watts, a defensive back from Notre Dame. I mean, this dude, we just talked about Notre Dame's win and on the defense, and we were holding off on talking about Watts so I can give him this his due right here. He had 7 tackles in the game, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, then he scooped another fumble and scored with it. I mean, his night was ridiculous. And by the way, it was exactly 50 years ago today, Luther Bradley, who played with my brother Bob at Notre Dame, that Luther Bradley had 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a caused fumble, and a win over unbeaten 10th-ranked Southern Cal, which is exactly what it was Saturday night. They were unbeaten. They were 10th ranked. And Xavier Watts has the game of his life on a defense that just played lights out all night. So Xavier Watts, man, enjoy it. I'm sure you will, but what a night you had.
Xavier Watts, by the way, the old converted wide receiver, came to Notre Dame as a wide receiver, has been a big part of that defensive backfield this year. And again, played the game of his life, set up a bunch of these touchdowns. It got ridiculous by the end. He had the scoop and score towards the end of that game to really drive home that this is going to be done. The special teams touchdown, Jadarian Price on the return there. On a game, Xavier Watts helped save Notre Dame's season from spiraling to a place where going into the bye week, you would have been asked uncomfortable questions about the coaching staff, about this team, about what you had done with Sam Hartman. And instead, you walk in now, you know this, Dad, no better feeling already than a win going into the bye week, because usually, and Marcus Freeman hinted at it after the game, normally we say it's 24 hours. We might go 48 hours celebrating this one, because that win and that performance going into the bye week can go a long way in determining how many days off the coach is going to give you, what that schedule is going to look like early on during that week, all these things that he helped out with.
And that adds to it is Notre Dame's on break. So all the students are going, so they have no classes. And, you know, again, I'm sure people are like, oh, they're in college, they play football. So listen, it's a nice mental break.
Yeah, they had midterms last week. Like, we know, if you're like betting on college football, part of it is also looking and acknowledging the human elements of this that college players deal with that others don't. They had midterms last week leading up to that game, so that's huge.
Yeah, it's monstrous. So monster game by him, and I hope they get to all collectively exhale, take a breath, get some rest, and then finish out the season well.
Exactly. So that opportunity in large part because of Xavier Watts and the job that he did there. Let's get to the first team all weekend team.
Yep.
Dad, this one's easy for me. Travis Kelce didn't play a snap this weekend after Thursday Night Football, but man alive, my dog had a weekend. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift spotted all over New York together. They both made celebrity guest appearances on Saturday Night Live that Travis has hosted in the past here. Taylor Swift went to introduce Ice Spice, one of her good friends, and the musical guest for that. Travis showed up in the football sketch. They were both seen at the after party, very touchy-feely, very lovey-dovey.
Nolan going on. I bet a lot of people are wondering about that, huh?
I mean, I don't know if there are any wondering whoever Al Michaels in Thursday Night Football calling them her good buddy Travis Kelce. There wasn't nothing buddy about that, Jesse. That was hot and heavy.
That was the first time I think that we've seen real, you know, PDA, I would say, between them, right? Like they were holding hands. Yes. I mean, he was like, had his hand on her lower back, getting her out of the car. I feel like in the times past, unless it was like a secret photo that, you know, someone took at an after party that they definitely weren't supposed to take, this is the first time we've seen them step out in public looking extremely coupley.
And this is, to your point, because only they wanted it to. Taylor Swift is smart enough and savvy enough to where she didn't want pictures. She didn't get pictures. She was excited to show off that she's now with a man she can wear heels around. Because at every turn, she busted those things out there and let them know, hey, my boyfriend's 6'6" and I can do this now because I'm not dating little guys anymore.
Yeah.
And can I just say from the football side of it, would every football analyst friggin' relax?
Yeah.
Enough with the, don't make the sideshow the show. Enough of the, just shut up.
It is the show.
I mean, you're still seeing every play. You're still talking about a game. It's like you think we've never talked about someone who's been in a suite or some star who's been at a game. Relax, people. Just relax and enjoy. And this is to my brethren of analysts and people on our side of football. Just relax.
Also, like, who do they think that this is coming from?
I mean,
like, don't you think Roger Goodell is like, focus on Taylor, everybody bring Taylor in, and like everyone's like, oh my God, why are they doing this? It's because the NFL is asking them to do it.
And plus, even if they're not, show them. I mean, they're the hot couple. Who cares? It's not interrupting the game. Just everybody to Aaron Rodgers, RELAX. Quickly, my first teamer, Michael Penix Jr. You had what a game you had, the Washington, Oregon. We need to get into more. He has clearly stamped himself. He was the Heisman favorite by odds going into the game, and he has really stamped that. 22 of 37, over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. It had the interception, but 4 more touchdowns. As his big-time receiver said, you're looking at the Heisman Trophy winner right now, and you are. Michael Penix Jr. is not only, and the Heisman has a great team he's playing for right now, but he's doing himself really well in the NFL draft stock.
Every team, both those, Oregon and Washington, were exactly who we thought they were in that game. Washington able to make one more play, and now they are in the driver's seat. Who's in the driver's seat in the NFL? We ask next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We've mentioned this a few times, but after the weekend, no undefeated teams remain in the NFL, okay? Meaning the 72 Dolphins can go ahead and pop their champagne. Only team to ever go undefeated in a season. Congratulations to them. They continue to reign. So that leaves us with 5 teams sitting at 5-1, guys. And 2 of them are playing each other on Sunday Night Football in Week 7. This is going to be a electric game. 2 high-flying offenses. 53, the current game total for Dolphins-Eagles. That's going to be a really good one.
Yeah, I get to call that one. So I'm calling the game tonight, and then I'll go back to the Sunday night games. I've been doing the Monday nighters with Kevin Harlan because Kurt Warner has been overseas calling those games. So I go back with Ryan Radke. And yeah, next Sunday we're doing Miami at Philly. So
my God. All right, there you go. Popcorn ready.
I've been happy with your schedule, your college schedule. You've been having some great games, and I've been falling into that as well. Real quick, you have a problem with 72 Dolphins popping champagne every year when the last undefeated team loses?
No, like I get it. If I had an accomplishment that extraordinary and singular, I would be obnoxious about it. I would let everybody know I would be insufferable. And it's really not all that insufferable because we haven't seen a ton of content about them tracking it, leading up to it. It's just, hey, all right, we kind of acknowledge it. You know what it is, though? It's like Bobby Bonilla Day. We're working in this job. You hear about it so much, and it's so firmly ingrained as a thing that gets talked about all the time that I'm sick of Bobby Bonilla Day, and I'm sick of the 72 Dolphins champagne popping thing. We begrudgingly have to cash that chip every time it comes up. But no, I'm not mad at them about it. I have no problem with them about it.
So the one thing I'll say, and Jesse, I'll ask you, and Mike, I'll ask you. I've talked about this a number of times over the couple of decades of doing shows. Have had on Hall of Famers and or record holders.
Sure.
Right? And I've like a record that I hold, and I'll get to hold forever unless Notre Dame brings wrestling back, is I had the fastest pin in Notre Dame history for wrestling, like 13 seconds. Unfortunately, 2 years after I left, they dropped wrestling, which is a shame.
Yeah.
And people who I brought on that have records, I said, do you want to see your record beaten? And a lot of them say, oh yeah, I'd love to see it beaten. And I'm like, hell no. I openly will say, if wrestling comes back, I don't want anybody to pin anybody faster than my record. Now, if they do, I would be the first to shake their hand and say, congratulations. But am I hoping it happens? Hell no. I want that on my gravestone after hopefully loving, husband and hopefully loving father, unless you and your kids get together and don't put that there. And
TBD.
Record for fastest pin at Notre Dame. That's what I want there. I'm like amazed at that. I'm like, no, I don't want my record. I would be like that with the 72 Dolphins. No, I don't want to see another undefeated team. And we got so close, obviously, with the Patriots that one year. But no, I don't want my record broken.
I think that's the thing most confusing to me. It's one of 2 of the things you always hear in sports is, oh, no, I want my record to be broken by some people. And this idea that, oh, to win a championship, I want to go through the best. I want to play the best. No. I want to play the worst team that could possibly get there. Again, this is all personal experience, but in 2012, I'd have rather played Kansas State. Kansas State fans, I know you and I have a great relationship now. I've gotten to go to Manhattan and call a bunch of games, but I'll re-up this take every time it comes around. We'd have dog walked y'all. Colin Klein's a great player. I promise. We'd have been wearing rings right now if we'd have played Kansas State, not Alabama that year. Because of the way that season shook out. I will go to my grave with that take because we never actually have to see it out. But that's one of those other things. It's like, no, I just want to win no matter what. I don't care who we play. I don't need this ego boost of having beaten the best team. The same way I don't need to see someone take down my record. Hell no.
Nope. Jesse, you?
Look, if you ain't first, you're last. So at the end of the day, doesn't matter how you got there. Doesn't matter. All that people remember is if you were first, okay? So I like being first. I agree with you 100%. I like you said, am I going to get upset that someone breaks it? No. But I'm not rooting for them to break it.
That's just like I always say this about the golf, when the etiquette of golf, you don't hope somebody misses. BS. Man, if I'm standing on the side of the green and I just putt it out and I need this dude to miss for me to win, I guarantee in my head I'm saying, no, miss it. Just not saying it out loud, but I sure as hell am hoping he misses that thing. I mean, come on, that's human nature.
Yes, you would think. Yes. I mean, you know what happens when you have records like that? You know how cool it is? Back at Notre Dame, where they have all on the walls inside the Notre Dame football facility, they got all the records on there for most tackles, receptions, all this stuff on the wall. They put your picture up in there. Yeah. Bring your kids back and show them your picture up in there. My picture's up in that building on accident because they haven't changed out the game shots from other places in there. And you best believe if I was one of those guys with a number on the wall, that'd be cool as hell to go back to. So, no, I'm absolutely out on that.
Had to get that squared away.
Totally understand the 72 Dolphins popping champagne here,
yes.
even if it's one of those sports headlines that, for me, is beaten into the ground. Bobby Bonilla Day probably still ranks number one there, but we can get to that when we get back to Bobby Bonilla Day. Dad, instead, we've got this conversation coming up because the Eagles and the 49ers both go down this weekend. And so we were talking this morning before the show. Now it's the interesting conversation because Philadelphia kind of felt like they had been holding on for dear life a little bit, hadn't looked their best relative to last year's performance, which is understandable given all the change and turnover there. For the 49ers, though, this is the third consecutive week or so where the team that we've newly anointed as the best in football has found a way to lose. We did it a couple of weeks ago with the Miami Dolphins coming off that 70-point beatdown or almost 72-point beatdown against the Denver Broncos, and then they lost to the Bills the next weekend. We did it with the Bills after that, and then they ended up going down. And now we've got it here, or excuse me, the Bills didn't go down there. The Bills went down earlier in the season, but I digress. And now we do it here with the 49ers.
Right.
So the question becomes, as we look around now, we've got the Eagles, Niners, Dolphins, Lions, and Chiefs as the 5-1 teams left in football. Dad, among those, who do you actually trust the most right now? Whether it's the best out of that group, whether it's the team that you feel best about at this point, who are you putting at the top of that 5-1 pile?
It's two different things we're asking, right? Who do you trust the most and who do you think is the best team right now, right? I trust the most. I still trust Patrick Mahomes the most.
Sure.
Because I'm worried if Travis Kelce is not there, nobody else has really stepped up, right? Maybe the rookie wide receiver, Rice, I think is outside of him, it's been Pacheco running and catching it out of the backfield and Kelce. And we saw Kelce miss the first game and Detroit beat him by one, albeit just by one. But they worry me a little bit if Kelce's not there. But I'm doing this like Kelce is there. So I still trust Patrick Mahomes the most. By record of so far, the Eagles have had the toughest of all the records. And they haven't looked the best. We kept wondering. So I'm not as though what I'm shocked here more than anything else is kind of the way they got beat. A really weakened secondary for the Jets because of injury, and they couldn't take advantage of it. But I do agree with you. We kind of saw this coming a little bit with Philly because they didn't have been playing their best ball. The 49ers, without question, have the most overall talent. When you start listing depth of talent, they have the most. Lost a couple of guys again, as we said, in McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, and Brock Purdy looked a little more human in this one with his first regular season loss. Who do I want? Just from the part of me that loves to see a story, I'd love to see the Lions be that team. And I mean, listen, of the teams we're talking about right now, only two are on the AFC. The three are in the NFC: Eagles, 49ers, and Lions. And Lions are right there. I love what they're doing right now.
They're doing great. I still think it's the 49ers, though. I think
in the NFC or overall?
Overall. I think of these teams, because you're right. The Mahomes conversation is based on history more than it is logic at this point. It's, hey, we've seen that quarterback and coach combination, no matter what, be able to sort through whatever personnel they've got around. I mean, hell, they didn't end up winning that Super Bowl, but there was still a part of a lot of us that thought, oh, even with both starting tackles out going into the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, Patrick Mahomes would be enough. And in most situations and in most games he's been in that game, he still gave them more of a chance than they had any right to because he's been that singularly great. You mentioned the who's healthy conversation. You and I were talking about this yesterday. If you took every team's best non-quarterback off the roster going forward, who would you be most confident about? And that answer's overwhelmingly Pat. Because Pat's been the only one of these quarterbacks that we've talked about here who's really been weapon agnostic.
Right.
Everyone else, you've got to have some question. Patrick Mahomes, he's a guy that's always going to elevate you beyond the sum of your parts. But outside of the Patrick Mahomes brainworm that's firmly lodged in my head, that after picking against him last year in the Super Bowl probably won't ever happen to me again because I got burned in that big way. I look at the 49ers and I go, all right, given the circumstances around this loss, the fact that you lost two of your best offensive skill weapons in the midst of this game. I understand people are going to view that as a net negative on Brock Purdy. It's another information point on Brock Purdy for me.
Yes.
But it's still the difficulty of losing a star player in the middle of a game as opposed to before the game when you can plan on it.
Preparing.
We talked about this a lot leading up to the opener with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, where they knew going into this game, they knew going into that game they were going to be without Chris Jones.
Right.
But you lose Travis Kelce the week of the game in a freak walkthrough injury, and now all of a sudden it makes it a lot more difficult to overcome that in the short term. I think when you combine that with the Jim Schwartz factor and just the quality of opponent on the other side, that Browns defense, probably the best in the NFL right now.
Yeah, they are.
They own 3 of the top. I saw Ben Solak tweet this going into Sunday Night Football. The Browns right now, in terms of defensive success rate, own 3 of the top 5 performances of the 2023 season so far. That's insane.
And as I said, they've given up 200 yards a game. That hasn't been done through 5 games since the 71 Colts. So, and Schwartz has Shanahan's number without question. The best team, I agree with you, is San Francisco, because you have to make everything equal. You can't sit there and say if this guy's out or if that guy's out. Who I trust the most, Patrick Mahomes. Who the best team is San Francisco still. So I agree with that. And here's me hoping the Lions, can break through and be there, because they are. If you don't have a dog in the race, which I don't, there's part of me that leans to Eagles because that's where most of my career was. But still,
How worried are you about what you've seen from Philadelphia, especially because for them, outside of Lane Johnson, we've talked about, they've been a little bit banged up intermittently on defense. No Jalen Carter in that game. He rolled an ankle during practice this week, and so he was out there, which was big for them defensively. But it seems like all the problems that we've talked about have largely skewed on offense and the way they've gone. And they were going up against top-flight defense also, albeit the Jets had 3 of their 4 starting defensive backs out of this game. And this Eagles passing attack that we saw, A.J. Brown still got his 4th straight game now over 125 receiving yards. I believe the only player, at least in Eagles history, to do that, or at least most recently. But when it mattered the most, Jalen Hurts throws the back-breaking interception that ultimately loses them this game in a year where people have been kind of waiting for them to play their best football. Certainly didn't show up in this game where they should have had an advantage based on the quarterback on the other side.
It does worry me a little bit, but I will say defenses have been strong this year. And the Jets, we had the players say we want to have a historic defense, and they hadn't been. They've been really good. This was a great performance. The Browns was a great performance. We saw some great defensive performances against top teams, and that it seems so outdated now. Offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. I still want to believe that, but man, you get some defensive performances like that, those are going to win championships.
Yeah, that was undoubtedly the weekend that if you were someone who was a holdover from, remember the 2017 NFL playoffs where 3 of the final 4 quarterbacks were backup guys that had gotten in there. That's the Nick Foles Super Bowl year for the Eagles. And everyone thought going forward, oh, you don't really need a franchise guy. You can get by without all that. And we obviously all then woke up the next day and remembered that we're not idiots, and that's not the case, especially if you're in the AFC right now. But this weekend went a long way in reminding you that even in a league that overwhelmingly caters to offense in the rules, we've got some of the best units we've seen in a while. Hell, if you can see why Aaron Rodgers is listening to Dolphin Sex so much, trying to get back and saying he's going to get back during this season, because he sees on the other side of the football what they've got in that defense. Much like the Browns, that's a championship caliber defensive unit that is getting just enough from its offense to win games in the regular season. But I think everyone there, and still in their heart of hearts, knows you're not going to win games in the postseason with that kind of offensive play on the other side from Zach Wilson. And that's why Aaron Rodgers being down there on the field got so many Jets fans hot and bothered watching him throw 5 weeks post-up.
And I think there's a worry in Cleveland too, right? They won this game without Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson has not been anywhere near what Deshaun Watson is, and they're locked into that guy for so much money. And they're kind of like the Jets. You're looking at the defensive side of the ball and going, my God, we have it. We have the defense to win a championship. And we've seen defenses win championships without great offenses. See Baltimore back in the day, see Tampa Bay for a year. So it's happened, but it's difficult to do
especially nowadays. Like you're going back a lot of rule changes ago to find that.
And this is what's tough.
The Legion of Boom Seahawks would probably like a word in that too.
Right. You go back to 85 Bears as well, though they had McMahon, they did, and Walter Payton. But I see that as you look at these teams that have these defenses and go, my God, come on. Can we get anything on the other side of the ball? So quickly, how do you rank them? We have San Francisco 1. Who do you have 5? you have Detroit 5 just because of history? You kind of have to put
I would say even less so because of history and just looking at the rest of these groups and what they're capable of. The Chiefs are going to be up near the top for me, probably 2 behind the 49ers. And then I would probably put the Dolphins after that before the Eagles. And the thing with the Dolphins that's tough is the defense. While it showed up some yesterday, this season has been a weakness for them.
Yeah.
It has been the liability and will be the Achilles heel potentially for them going forward. But the offense is so overwhelmingly potent. It's Golden State Warriors-esque. And so I would probably put them just over the Lions right now. But, man, even as I say that out loud, the Lions defense has overperformed a lot of expectation this year. Some of the guys they brought over there expecting to help out have. So it would be a real dogfight there, but I would probably have them in the 4 or 5 spot.
I think I would as well. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The Eagles are another one, too. Even with this loss, I still find myself going, well, they're going to figure it out, right?
I keep believing that as well. That's why we say that about Detroit then. Boy, they're in an area where they haven't been in a long while. Can they keep that going? Can they live near the higher end of the mountain than the lower end of the mountain?
And to be clear, I think they can. Just because I'm not saying Detroit's not the best team in football right now, I believe it's sustainable. I think what they've built there is, I mean, you look at the game yesterday. They managed to go out there and get through this. They're getting Amon-Ra St. Brown back, but you had no Jahmyr Gibbs in the lineup. You lost David Montgomery in the middle of that game, and so you're out there and your 3rd and 4th string running backs giving you touches, and you still find a way to go out and get this done. So they're a team that they've set the foundation well enough here. Jared Goff, we talked about the confidence that he's playing with. I do believe in them. That's not what this is.
I do as well. And, we talk about the defensive side of the ball. How far can you carry? These 5 teams, you look at their defenses. Cleveland is number 1 in the NFL overall. San Francisco is number 3. Kansas City is 4, 5, 6. Detroit is 7. It's only Miami who was in the, just below halfway as far as total defense. So they have defenses that can carry them.
They do. So speaking of, we've talked a lot about injuries in this. Jesse, this is a bad weekend to be a quarterback in week 6. We saw the number of backups proliferating across the sport. It's been absolutely wild.
You guys, 5 quarterbacks, got hurt in week 6. Justin Fields with a hand injury, Jimmy Garoppolo with a back injury, Trevor Lawrence knee, Baker Mayfield hand, Ryan Tannehill ankle. And then you had Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, and Anthony Richardson, all starters that were ruled out before their games. So the injury bug just really coming for QBs.
Well, I mean, that was the other part of this weekend, Dad, is so much of the damage got done by backup quarterbacks. And I'll lump Zach Wilson in there. He wasn't supposed to be the week 1 starter this year. I get that he's been the starter for a little bit longer now, but you looked out across from there. PJ Walker getting that win that we talked about here. Brian Hoyer having to go out here for the Las Vegas Raiders, another former Patriot castoff, going up against his old boss and getting it done in that game. We saw Malik Willis go in there, and man, I saw the sentiment echoed across the timeline. What does Will Levis have to look like in practice for you to not give him spin at this point? I mean, Malik Willis took 4 awful sacks in this game at critical junctures.
He got rushed hard for sure, but then he hangs on to the ball a lot as well. I mean, every single play. It's the same thing I was thinking of. What about Will Levis?
And we talked about Malik Willis in the preseason. It looked like he'd made strides, but I'd love to see Levis get out there at some point. Again, I have to imagine it's just been, hey, you'd like to avoid it if possible at this point. Ryan Tannehill was still the guy you wanted to rock with. We're going to need to see the rookie at some point.
So, without question, would you agree? The most Googled name yesterday was who came in for Justin Fields? I mean, this had to stun everybody. Tyson Bagent, I believe is how you say it.
Well,
Bagent?
Was Bagent more Googled or Shepherd College?
Exactly. Tyson Bagent went to Shepherd College. He's a rookie. He's a rookie from Shepherd College that is the backup quarterback for the Chicago Bears. I have never heard of him. Not going to lie, I don't think anybody had. Shepherd College, for those wondering, is in West Virginia, if I'm looking at the correct.
No, it's in West Virginia. You are correct.
I had no idea who this player was. Hey, kudos to him for showing enough to somebody, obviously, there in Chicago that he should be not only be on the roster, but be the backup. That was unbelievable. I had no clue who he was, but more power to him. Now, it didn't work well,
Yeah, I was going to say more power to him. We clearly saw Justin Fields still pretty important to this team because a Vikings team without Justin Jefferson that had to try and cook everything low and slow did not look great on offense against the Bears defense. Forget what happened with the offense. Right. That Bear defense has been nothing to write home about all season long, and they held the Vikings to 19 points. Yeah. Difficult one out there. We still got more NFL to get to. So coming up next, let's get a little mic'd up Monday. Some of the best sights and sounds from around the league next year on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. It's time for Mic'd Up Monday, presented by Wrangler. Some choice sounds to discuss from around NFL Sunday. And guys, Dolphins defeated the Panthers 42-21, and Tyreek Hill showed out, okay? So he left the game with cramps at one point and still had 163 yards and a touchdown. So he has 150 receiving yards in a game for the 15th time in his career here. That ties Jerry Rice for the second most games, such as this one, before a player's 30th birthday. Okay, so on his touchdown, he decides to celebrate by grabbing a phone from a media member and doing a backflip. Check this out.
I know the NFL gonna find me for it, but it's worth it though. Just being able, to create memories I can look back on whenever I'm done playing is always, something I think of each and every time I play this game. So every time I step on the field, man, I'm gonna try to make it memorable.
Okay, so the NFL you took down the video. You can still find it online if you want to, not an issue. But pretty hysterical stuff. He's like, I know that I'm going to be getting fined here. I don't care. I'm gonna do the backflip.
So this was a setup all the way. The guy had started the video. I don't know if it was a Miami Dolphin employee.
They had premeditated this.
It was definitely premeditated. The guy started it, because as we all know, wearing gloves, you can't do anything on the phone if you're wearing gloves.
Well, if you got the gloves that have the little bit of metal there, some of them have the.
I'm going to doubt football receiving gloves have the metal in it to start.
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking
Because,
about the guy.
because no, because you saw Tyreek Hill kind of hitting the phone like he was doing
Sure.
it. But the video had already, it was a setup, and I'm fine with the setup, no problem at all. In all honesty, Mike, and here's the thing, celebrations you can do, you can't use a prop. So as soon as he grabbed the phone, that was going to be the end of it. I wish they would let him go. Now, God knows how far they would go with props, but I don't have a problem with it. To me, it's not hurting anybody.
How
no,
big
to
do
me,
you
it's
think
less
the
that.
fine's
Like,
going to be? How big? He's been
Probably
fined
about
like
10 grand.
every week.
Probably-
It was the socks. It was like he's just
Probably 7,
racking
10
them up.
grand, or depending on if you've been fined for that before, it'll
See,
jump a little higher.
I think the better question here is because actually, if you watch the video itself doesn't turn out that cool.
No.
It was a lot cooler watching him do a flip holding a cell phone
Yeah.
than it was watching the actual
video.
footage that doesn't give you a full appreciation for the athletic marvel here. What I want to ask is which you would rather get fined for, which way you would rather go out. Tyreek Hill doing a phone flip fine, or George Kittle getting fined for the F the Cowboys shirt that he pulled up in their win over the Dallas Cowboys.
I played for the Eagles. Which do you think I would do?
Well, I mean, but like, wouldn't you like to be able to do a backflip?
Well, from the standpoint of athletic ability, I would love to stand there and do a backflip. Yes, it would be embarrassing if I tried to do it, but to be able to hold up a shirt that says F Dallas when I was with the Eagles would have been awesome.
See, that shirt was the objectively, Jesse, to me, cooler flex in terms of celebrations because of the context of the game. But if you're asking me which one I'd rather do, I would rather be able to do a backflip at all, let alone in football pads, after I just scored a 40-yard
It did
touchdown.
make me nervous though. Like it happened really quickly and then it was over. But I was like, this is just like something that would happen is like Tyreek Hill does a backflip and like tears his ACL. Like I was like,
because we've seen,
geez.
you're right. We've
Yeah.
seen guys celebrate before and come down and blow out their knee.
Yes.
We've seen players do it,
The
kickers do it.
risk.
It's been,
Yeah.
we have. Here's the other thing. The bank account that you have to say, I'm going to do this and I know I'm going to get fined. I wouldn't be able to go home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Face your mother.
Yeah, they're
Nope.
these guys are making a little bit different money than you did
Nope.
back in the day. Let's get to our next bit of sound here. Jesse, we had another London game this weekend. The Ravens beat the Titans over across the pond. It was an ugly game befitting both teams, but we had an interesting sight and sound on the plane ride home here for one of our first-class passengers.
Yeah, so, Ravens taking down Tennessee and London, cross the pond. It's a long flight home, right? So Ravens defense knocked Tannehill out of the game in the third quarter, registered 6 sacks. It was good stuff. Marlon Humphrey had some fun on the flight home. Just look at what Roquan Smith is attempting to pretend he doesn't hear. You just got to watch the video. Check this out.
There's no way he could be asleep this fast. Leads our defense. Wait, can you even hear me? We're just going to do this right here. Man, look, I'm thinking about football even in my sleep. It don't matter what's going on. Man, I'm going to get that.
Okay, so
Marlon Humphrey, one of our nation's premier internet trolls, one of
Yes.
the best follows in the NFL, was on his Instagram live videotaping Roquan Smith fake sleeping in first class on the way home after their game, trying to get a rise out of him here. Deb, my question is, how jealous are you that you weren't in the league long enough to see planes like this? They got the first-class pods, beautiful moonlighting there, all the snacks and accoutrements, and Roquan Smith already locked in on to next week.
So I went to London a couple of times. Now, back when I was playing, it was just for preseason games.
Sure.
So we were there. So we had planes that had that, but I hadn't been in the league long enough at that point. It was when I had first gotten to Philadelphia to get that. But yeah, because I barely listened to the video because I was too busy looking at the great laydown seats that they were in.
Oh,
It's
man, that's good
fantastic. And after you win, man, flights home are a ball. The longer they are, the more fun you're going to have before you eventually just pass out in your seat.
Well,
And he was trying to.
Yeah, he was trying to. I mean, obviously, it seemed like the plane hadn't. You can't go live on Instagram when the plane's in the air, so it hadn't taken off yet. So he was like, "Oh, you're already sleeping down here, buddy."
Well, and I mean, Marlon Humphrey, the worst kind of person on the plane, one who sees your headphones
Oh, yeah.
on and still
what's
tries
the
to have a
messenger?
conversation with you. That's like my car. You see someone tap and they ask you a question. I'm like, I put the headphones on for a reason. This is the international sign. I don't want to talk to anybody right now. So you blazing past that stop sign is a total no-no on the airplane.
Teammates can do it. If you're on a regular flight and somebody you don't know picks off your headphones, then you're going to have issues. And I'll say again, one of the toughest things in the transition from the NFL to the real world was flights.
Yes.
Of what you could do on a charter flight with an NFL team. The amount of snacks that you got, how much you got fed was fantastic. I've been out of the game since 94 and I still miss all that.
Charter flights and police escorts, the two things you have no idea how much you love until they are gone. Let's get to one more soundbite here. Jesse, disrespect is something that players always like leaning into, and we had one of the many former Patriots on the field for the Patriots-Raiders game play that card with joy.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of not knowing what you have until it's gone, the Patriots losing again, 21-17 to the Raiders. Pats are 1-5, I would like to point out. 4 games under 500 for the first time since 2000. It's been a while. No one is happy with Bill at the moment, apparently not even the other team. So former Patriot, now Raider, Adam Butler, after the game said he felt disrespected that Bill Belichick didn't talk to him after the game.
It did make me very upset that, Bill didn't even have the respect for me to say anything after the game. Not even congratulate me. You can't, tell me, you look good or you don't look good, whatever, kiss my ass, something. But he didn't say anything, so kind of felt, disrespected. Made me feel made me feel bad. And I know Coach Belichick has bigger things to worry about, obviously. They're going through a tough time, but I mean, say a wave, like something, but nothing.
This could not be more ridiculous because Bill Belichick isn't speaking to anyone. I mean, he's just having the absolute worst year of his career. The media's blowing up about, should he be fired? And Adam Butler's like, he didn't even say hi to me after we beat them.
And Adam Butler was serious. I didn't know if he was joking or not for a second, and he seemed actually serious.
I agree. I thought this was going to be tongue-in-cheek, we just beat him, and he didn't even say hi to me. He was. Because there were a number. You had Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer, Jacoby Myers, you had a number of former Patriots. And I wouldn't think 2 seconds about that. Bill barely says anything anyway, and the position Bill is in right now and how bad that team is, and to say he didn't talk to me, I'm with you. I thought he was going to be goofing around about it, but he did seem serious.
It is a good reminder of the confidence, the internal motivation that athletes have to succeed at this level, to believe so much in themselves and that they are worthy of all these things, to go out there and succeed. Adam Butler, by the way, had a sack in this game and a couple of tackles, a great Kamehameha celebration in the middle of that I really enjoyed. And he believed, hey, I'm out here balling, doing my thing. I was balling for them. Why isn't Bill showing me the love that I deserve? Go off, young king.
Here's what we need. In Bill's presser this coming week, one of the questions, this is what Adam Butler had to say about you not saying hi to him, just to see what Bill's response would be. That would be gold,
hey,
right?
Our good buddy Courtney Cox does a great job over on the morning show at WEEI. I mean, she asked him the Taylor Swift question the other week. Courtney, balls in your court on making that one happen on an uncomfortable morning in New England. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield still holding it down in the Boston studio. And as we get set, Dad, you're on the call. Westwood 1 for Chargers and Cowboys tonight here in Los Angeles. We wanted to take a look ahead of that game and get a little help from someone who knows the Cowboys and the NFL very well. David Helman, the host of the NFL on Fox podcast, also has done a great job covering the Cowboys for Fox and others. David, good morning. How you doing, brother?
What a nice lead in, Mike. Thank you. I'm doing wonderful, man. Happy to be on with y'all.
No, we appreciate you coming on this morning, man. And we've been talking a lot. We'll certainly get to the Cowboys coming up here tonight as we've got Monday Night Football and a big rebound full of revenge game feels all across it for a lot of different reasons. But we've been talking coming off this weekend, David, we had the last 2 unbeatens go down. So we got a handful of 5-1 teams in the NFL after both the 49ers and the Eagles decide to lose this weekend. Now that the records are all even amongst the 5-1 teams, who do you find yourself trusting the most? Who do you think is actually the best team in the NFL at this point now that everybody has a blemish?
Ooh, isn't that a great question? And also, I love the phrase, like, the last 2 unbeatens go down. Isn't that such a college football phrase? Like,
Yeah.
I love that. That's the unpredictability of the NFL this season. Shoot. You know what? I'll probably stick with the San Francisco 49ers, to be honest with you. I know they just lost. I know they've got to fall in the power rankings because that's what happens in our business. You judge based on the most recent game, but they played a good chunk of that without Deebo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey. We'll see how severe those problems are, but there's just so much to like on that team. I love the Dolphins as well. If I can't pick a team that just lost, I'll roll with Miami, but I got to see more from the Niners before I'm truly worried about them.
Is there a team that you see at 5-1, but see maybe falling off with the way they're playing right now and may not end the season where we might think?
I'm not ready to go that far, but you got to at least point out the fact that the Eagles have yet to really look like an amazing team, which I think it's a testament to how good they can be, that they got to 5-1 without really playing great football. You know, we've seen what the Niners are capable of doing. We've seen them flex their muscle. We've seen the Dolphins score 70 points. We've seen the Lions, I don't think, have a truly dominant performance, but they've just kind of beaten up on everybody they've played. But yeah, I mean, and the Chiefs are the Chiefs. I mean, they've been there at the end of every season for 5 years running. So again, I got to see a lot more before I get worried about them. But it is interesting that we're 6 weeks in and the Eagles just keep kind of playing clunky football. They typically get away with it, but not on Sunday. So I'm not ready to say they're going to fall off, but it would be nice to see them kind of flex their muscles.
Well, speaking of NFC East teams that we're waiting to see fully flex their muscles, David, the Cowboys are coming off their worst game of the season, an absolute blowout versus the 49ers that rattled everybody to their core. As you've had time now to sort through the wreckage and get ready to see what this team's going to do in this game, what's the biggest real problem that showed up in that 49ers loss that got out of whack for them last week?
You know, just talking about the Eagles consistently playing clunky football, the Niners game, as soon as you get your butt kicked like that, it kind of makes you go back and look, and things that you were able to explain away after wins, all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe it was a glaring issue and they were just getting away with it. And honestly, through 6 games to this point, we really haven't seen the Dallas offense truly dominate or truly really look like they have their stuff together. They've been the beneficiaries of some short fields, of some plus turnover margins, and that's all part of football. I get it. But I mean, this was a team that under Kellen Moore, who they are playing tonight, you know, they were top 5 in the league for 4 years. They were number 1 in scoring a couple of times. This was a team that never had a problem getting into the end zone and never had a problem driving the field. Cowboys have racked up some yards, but it hasn't really translated into truly explosive offensive performances. Somebody asked me yesterday, somebody on Twitter tweeted at me in the middle of the afternoon and was like, David, what is the Cowboys' most fun offensive play of the season so far? And I I was taken aback. I was like, there's not a lot of candidates. Like, you're not seeing a lot of explosive plays. You're not seeing a lot of chunk gains or big touchdowns. And it's going to need to change. And it's going to be under a microscope tonight with Mike McCarthy going against the guy that he ran out of town.
The Kellen Moore effect right now, the Cowboys have 5 points less per game, 27 yards less per game, and way down in red zone touchdowns per game with Kellen Moore gone. And all those stats on the Chargers side are up this year as well. So certainly a feather in the cap right now for Kellen Moore. You know, David, we always talk about, or people do, oh, get rid of the quarterback, get another one. It's so easy to say, get rid of him, and where's the next one going to be? But what is the shelf life really for the defense is a top 10 defense, but the shelf life for this offense and the way they're going right now, going down the road?
I pride myself on not overreacting to 1 week. Again, it's a long season and all that, but man, the 49ers game really shook me in terms of, and you're talking to a longtime Dak Prescott truther, a guy that I've constantly defended him from people that want to take his job, but that performance really, it makes you wonder what the shelf life is. And I'm not worried about Dak in the short term. It doesn't make any sense for him not to be the starter for the time being. Even really next year, it would be surprising if the Cowboys were that desperate to move on from him. His cap hit is just astronomical. Right. If he doesn't get an extension when the season's over, then you're talking about him counting $60 million against your cap. So I don't think in the short term I'm too worried about it, but I went into the season thinking, oh yeah, it's a foregone conclusion that Dak gets an extension at some point before March of next year, or certainly before the draft. And now I'm not so sure. I'm not. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit of an overreaction to one game, but when you lose like that to a team that you know you're probably going to have to beat in the playoffs, I don't think you can blame people for kind of reaching that conclusion. So I think in the short term, they'll be fine. And I do think they're plenty talented to win enough games to make the playoffs, but it's going to be how you perform in those big leverage moments. They get another one in a few weeks against Philly that I think is going to determine a lot about how committed they are to him in the big picture.
David, we only got about a minute left. We mentioned the Kellen Moore factor of this, and we know Jerry Jones is the person making the decisions and is highly emotional, highly invested in this team. If they were to lose tonight to Kellen Moore, who is in the building, as this continues to slide, do you see any real changes that they might make as a reaction to that in the coming weeks?
Right now, I can't see that. Jerry Jones, that reputation is well earned, but he's been a lot more patient in recent years. I mean, he held on to Jason Garrett for several years after he could have let him go. They'll go into their bye week. They'll be at 500. I think Jerry Jones will have a lot of rationalizations for why it's okay. I think it would take something more drastic than losing tonight. But this keeps up over the course of another month or two. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me given how much expectation was placed on this season.
Yeah, and that was, again, before the season, the pick for a lot of people saying this Cowboys roster was finally at a place where this felt like Super Bowl or bust this year. And so far, it's been a little bit more bust as of late. But like David said, it's still a team that's going to be a playoff team, a very long season that we are excited to see. David, thanks so much, man. We appreciate all the time today. Enjoy the game tonight, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon. All right, brother?
Anytime, y'all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Let me leave you with this stat. While Dallas is number 3 against the pass,
sure,
great rating. There are 5 games this year giving up pass yardage: 63, 151, 178, 200, 251. So they've given up more yards each week, including the highest 251. But they are 3rd in the NFL against the pass. But Justin Herbert is 3-0 against top 5 passing defense.
Yeah, so Justin Herbert's been sensational. We know they're banged up now. No more Mike Williams, Corey Lindsley, their starting center, not in the lineup anymore. It's the usual story for the Chargers on that side, but this is going to be a real bit of a crisis for the Cowboys if it doesn't look massively different than it did last week against the 49ers. Coming up next, let's get to some hoop dreams outside in a big matchup next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We're going to finish this thing off the way we always do. This, that, and third. 3 quick stories to send you off into your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live here Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKingsNetwork.com, the DraftKings YouTube channel under the GoJo with Mike Golic, GoJo and Golic podcast tab, and Samsung TV Plus, Roku, wherever else you see us, all over. A lot of places. We're trying to be everywhere. You can follow us on TikTok, too. We got the GoJo and Golic TikTok going right now. The IG's going off. The Twitter has always got that. Shout out to super producer Brandon making all that happen. So
world has changed.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit different for you now.
Yeah,
I've seen you looking confused at all the electronics around your home setup every day here. It's a lot for you.
I remember somebody interviewed me about the world of podcasts now, and I said how it's changed from radio. I said, you're talking to the wrong person. I said, you may want to interview my son. I said, I speak into a microphone. Where they disperse it, that's their business.
Yeah.
I'm just talking into the microphone.
It's going to go places. Yeah. I'm just here to do word stuff. Well, speaking of word stuff, let's get to this, that, and the third. And let's start with dance stuff.
No.
Mike Gundy and the Oklahoma State football team here, shocking people, getting a win against Kansas this last weekend. Even more shocking than that, though, is what Mike Gundy, outside of mullet cultivation, decided to do in his spare time here. Dad, enter Ted Lasso coming out here. What do you make of the Gundy dance moves in the locker room?
Dude got low, I'll tell you that much. My knees exploded when I saw him get low like that. Then he went with the handstand as well. I mean, I'm still used to him, to saying, I'm 40, I'm a man. That's still what's ingrained in my head. And I've done games out there. I like to talk to him about his area where he lives and the lakes he has and fishing, and good dude all around. And then you just see him getting down there, man. It's pretty impressive.
Do you think
pretty impressive what he's doing?
Do you think he panicked in that moment? Like, he went to do the handstand and then they grabbed his legs and started like bouncing him around. He was like, oh no, oh no.
What do I do now? I'm on my hands. What do I do now? But I think it's one of those you kind of get caught in the moment, right? You start, and then it just starts to go a little more, and you just kind of get caught up in it.
I tell you what, much like this season, it was a bit of a surprise. I did not expect Oklahoma State to be sitting here at 4-2 right now and a ranked win like that. I understand Jalen Daniels wasn't in the lineup, but we've seen plenty of Jason Bean there for Kansas and a really good team. And Oklahoma State, that got hit as hard by the transfer portal as any team in college football this offseason in the bad way, has rebounded pretty nicely this year. And the trust between players and coach, because you got to have trust to go up for that handstand, believing that someone on your team is going to show up and grab the ankles. Because I know this, I do not believe Mike Gundy to be a man that has done enough yoga. I don't know what his habits are as far as his practice to be able to pull off the handstand on his own.
Hit the full drop though, squatting down.
Well, that's you
can't have any knee issues at all.
Those hip flexors.
We've talked about this with you before. You're one of the great wedding guests of all time.
Yeah, gifted.
Have you ever done a handstand on the dance floor at a wedding?
No, I've never done a handstand on the dance floor at a wedding because I can't do a handstand much like him, and I don't trust my friends enough to grab my ankles and have my best interest in mind. Okay. He trusted his teammates there. Okay. That's the biggest difference. So, congratulations.
Jesse, you ever do a handstand while you're dancing?
No, I mean, I don't think, much like GoJo, I don't think that I have the faith in my core at this point to do a handstand.
Oh, your core. I thought you were going to say around you. So I was
But like, this doesn't happen often at weddings. That's not a thing people do at weddings.
I mean, especially as a woman at a wedding, like, unless you're trying to flash everyone, not a lot of handstands
that's also true.
happening.
Probably was trying to avoid that.
If you're wearing a dress, some women at weddings not wearing a dress, but
Gotcha.
Speaking of wins and not wearing dresses, more sports, this time in the WNBA, where, Jesse, we get a little bit of staving that went on.
Yeah, they are not going down without a fight, guys. So last night, Liberty defeated the Aces, forcing a Game 4. Now, the Liberty have really looked like a shell of themselves during the first 2 games of the WNBA Finals. They lost by a combined 45 points in those 2, but, back against the wall, you stave off elimination right there with that 87-73 victory in Game 3, keeping the championship hopes alive, guys. And it feels good to have a game here.
I am amazed. These are the 2 best teams. 4 times in the regular season, 1 time in the Commissioner Cup. That's 5. 2 games in Vegas, 1 in New York. So now we're at 8. 8 games between the 2 best teams, and it's never been below double digits.
Sure.
We have not gotten a close game yet. That's what blows my mind.
It's basketball, man.
I know, but man, you'd love to see a series go the full slate of games, and you'd love to see some close games. This was a 14-point game. This might have been the closest of all of them this year. It's amazing to me.
It was the first win for the New York Liberty in the WNBA Finals since 1999. Yeah. They're the only original team without a championship yet that's still operating right now. Huge crowd there, though, at Barclays. It was a scene there in New York, as it's often been with this team, one of the super teams out there. And, Dad, you brought this up, the inability of either of these teams to win on the road. The Aces now 0-3 at Barclays this season.
Is it diminishing the series at all?
No.
I mean, we do have the two best teams, but we can't get a competitive game.
No, because we've seen this happen before. We watched the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors do this plenty in the finals, where the games would just be seesawing blowouts here. You've got a competitive series. You've got to win back in this. The Aces looked like they could get this thing to maybe, or excuse me, the Liberty looked like they can maybe get this thing to go the distance.
5? Oh, they're going to win again. It's going to go back to the final game back in Las Vegas. I mean, that's just what the home teams do. And then Las Vegas will win it probably by 20 in game 5.
Well, that's going to be the biggest difference, and was in those prior series that we've talked about, is who can make just one play, who can muck this up at some point when you no longer have next game to bail you out there or something to worry about. There is no tomorrow, even though there still is right now.
Yeah, there really is.
But speaking of hoops, this one pretty cool, Jesse, as we get to the third portion of this. We got to see in this past season, really awesome moment for Nebraska women's volleyball, setting the outdoor attendance record, the largest, most attended women's sporting event in the history of women's sports at the Nebraska football stadium here earlier this year. But Jesse, the Iowa women's basketball team may not have outdone that number, but certainly created a scene and a memory of their own.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark and the Iowa women's basketball team wanted in on that action. They wanted some of that. So they hosted DePaul for an exhibition game. Did it in front of 55,646 people at Kinnick Stadium. So nearly filled the football stadium, guys, for the basketball game. Pretty cool. They had the court positioned vertically in the north end zone. And that was the attendance record for an NCAA women's basketball game.
Just amazing. And you mentioned it's Memorial Stadium for Nebraska, the volleyball women, 92,000 there. So this was 55,646. The record for a women's game had been UConn years ago in a national title game, the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, at like 26,000. So this over doubled that in an exhibition game. And still, one of the coolest things at this stadium is the Children's Hospital that is right there. There was another donation made,
$250,000. Yeah,
and I remember calling games. I know you have as well. When
I actually haven't been to Kinnick. No,
you haven't.
No, never been out there.
I mean, it gives you chills when you see the players turning around and waving to the children in the Children's Hospital. It's one of the great moments. But obviously, there's the sadness of knowing the children have to be in that hospital. But the support that they get from players and from the area is just incredible. So you got to see that again there. But congratulations. Listen, we have talked nothing about how women's sports has just exploded in popularity. And I can't stress enough, this was an exhibition game. It did not count. And 55,000 people were showing up. You know why? They were showing up to this game at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa. They wanted to see some actual offense.
I was going to say, you got to see points get scored in here.
Offense,
the football team can't get over 25 a game, but Caitlin Clark went out there and gave you a triple-double yet again, 34, 11, and 10, because that's all she knows how to do. It's a great point. You get to satisfy that desire. There were no punts in this basketball game, at least to the best of my knowledge, which might disappoint their particular kink, but it is a reminder, like you said, Caitlin Clark is box office.
She absolutely is.
We have seen these moments, I think, underscore what we've talked about. Women's sports have grown at such an unprecedented pace. They've always, not unprecedented, but they've always been a quality product. But now you're getting these stages that show people irrefutably these are continuing to be things you need to keep investing in when you give them the stage and the opportunity. Look what happens consistently each and every time with some of the most well-known names in sports, men's or women's right now. This happened to the men's basketball tournament last year, where we noticed the women's basketball tournament had way bigger names, way bigger stars, and the numbers reflected that. And this is just another number you can add to the pile to show just what a juggernaut the women's game is right now.
Women's game basketball and NCAA basketball starting this month or next month in November. But I love these outdoor games and the people that show up. I think it's awesome.
South Bend, ball's in your court, baby. Let's get the Lady Irish out there in Notre Dame Stadium. Love us up in the ratings, the comments, the reviews. Have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.